Now tonight, we have author and freshwater adventurer Doc Fletcher, and he's here to give you insider knowledge as to how to plan a great canoe and kayak trip. He'll share some of his favorite routes, photos, as well as some insider knowledge to some of his excursions. Now, I'm sure many of you are also excited to see who wins the free kayak and canoe trip award. But why don't we get started, and you can give a warm welcome to Doc Fletcher. Take it away.
Thank you. Well, I was planning to talk about wildflowers, but I'm very flexible, so I guess we can talk about canoeing and kayaking. Amanda or DJ, if you could kill some of the lights, the photos will show up a little nicer for these folks. Well, thanks for coming out to our program tonight. The name of it is Canoeing and Kayaking College Campuses in Michigan. The new book just came out a few months ago. There's the cover there. It's showing a kayaker going through the rapids on the Red Cedar River, going through the MSU campus area. That's the administration building in the background. And I'm going to start tonight by introducing the lady who handed to each of you a ticket as you walked in. And that's a lady who told me when we were canoeing the Rouge River together last year that she brings to our boat both ballast and minor comedic relief. So that's my wife, Maggie. Maggie and I took a trip this past May down to Jacksonville, Florida to visit some friends and spend Memorial Day weekend with them. And of course, when you're driving from southeast Michigan down to Florida, you go through Ohio, the home state of Neil Armstrong, the astronaut. You can't miss his Air and Space Museum when you're going down I-75 right there at the exit at Wapakoneta. When Neil first stepped foot on the moon in 1969, he famously said, "One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." But it was reported later that he added, "Good luck, Mr. Gorski." It was thought by several that, well, maybe that's just a reference to a perhaps rival Soviet cosmonaut. But when they looked over all of the folks in the Soviet space program and even the United States, they couldn't find a Mr. Gorski. So over the years, as Neil Armstrong would travel the country and give talks, they would ask him, "Could you tell us what you meant by 'Good luck, Mr. Gorski?'" And he would simply smile. So just about 20 years ago, he was given a speech, and at the end of the speech, the reporter said, "Mr. Armstrong, could you please tell us what you meant by 'Good luck, Mr. Gorski?'" And he said Mr. Gorski had recently died, so he felt he could tell the story. When he was a boy in Wapakoneta, he was playing baseball in the backyard with his buddies. One of them hit the ball over the fence, and Neil went to chase it. It rolled up to their neighbor's bedroom window, and the neighbors were Mr. and Mrs. Gorski. So when Neil bent over to pick up the ball, he heard Mrs. Gorski yelling at Mr. Gorski, "Sex, you want sex? You'll get sex when the boy next door walks on the moon." Good luck, Mr. Gorski. So, that has absolutely nothing to do with canoeing and kayaking, but I love hearing that story and I love telling it. So, anyways. I do want to also recognize a friend who's not here this evening. I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it. He's one of your old Rochester resident, Paul Carey. When Amanda first booked me for the program tonight, I was very excited to see Paul. I had the extremely good fortune of meeting him in 2009. He and I and his neighbor Joe Sayers, an old Chicago Cubs scout, and who must be very, very happy this year. I don't know if Joe's here tonight, but and another friend of ours, Tim Patrick, would get together at least once a year for lunch, every year from 2009 to 2015. And the man that came through on our transistor radios, Ernie's partner from 73 to 91, is in person as gracious and kind and cool as the voice we heard. And so I miss him not being here tonight. He passed in April, but he had told me growing up that his favorite Detroit Tiger was Gerald Walker. Gerald G. Walker was on the 35 World Championship Tigers. Go Tigers. And I brought Gerald's 34 card with me in honor of Paul. So sorry Paul couldn't be here tonight. Well, he is here. So canoeing and kayaking college campuses in Michigan. I graduated from Eastern Michigan University 40 years ago, which proves the theory that although you can only be young once, you can be immature all of your life. Being a member of the class of 1976, I tend to take an old school preparation for my research for the books. So in the case of this book, I spread a Michigan map out on the desk and I marked where all of the universities were, both in the lower and the upper peninsula. And I was very surprised to see how many of these universities had a great nearby river to paddle. So I wrote about 20 of these river college unions for the book, and one of those river college unions flows along the northern edge of the University of Michigan campus, and that would be the Huron River. Now, the Huron runs for 129 miles, but there's a short 90-minute stretch that runs very near the University of Michigan, and it begins just north of downtown Ann Arbor. And if you're going north of Ann Arbor and you look east from Main Street, you can see the Argo Canoe livery. And that's where this stretch starts. And it ends 90 minutes later downstream at Gallup Park, right near the intersection of Geddes and Huron Parkway. Within this 90-minute trip, there is a fantastic little 10-minute stretch, and they call it the Argo Cascades. It used to be if you launched upstream from the Argo Canoe livery, when you got up to the livery, you had to portage because the Argo Dam is there. Well, in 2012, a man-made canal was carved around the dam, and within that canal are the Argo Cascades. The Argo Cascades are 9 steps or drop pools as you go downstream. And it is an absolute blast to paddle through here. It's probably the steering requires skills a bit above that of a beginner, but very, very fun. You can see this one is really nice in showing the drops. So there's 9 of these drops. And then this is the final one where the main body of the water that has gone through the dam merges back from the right, and you come to the end here. Now, for those of you who navigate by taverns, the Argo Cascades are 200 yards directly north of Casey's Tavern, right across from the Amtrak station on Depot Street. So when you stumble out the door, just go 200 yards and you'll be right there. I had to show you some of these pictures because I thought they were so cool. These are part of the Marshal Frederick Sculpture Garden at the Saginaw Valley State University campus. I was at the campus a few hours before meeting some friends to paddle the Kayaking River for the book, and I had no idea that the sculpture garden existed. I thought it was absolutely beautiful. I involuntarily stopped my car and walked towards them. In 1988, Marshal Fredericks donated and was continuing to construct at that time 200 different sculptures that he gave to Saginaw Valley State College. Very, very cool. This was the one I thought the most moving. It's called Black Elk, where you have a Native American struck by a spear while he's astride a buffalo. Very, very cool. So besides this brief look at the Argo Cascades, and besides this brief look at the Marshal Frederick Sculpture Garden, Marshal Fredericks, I should mention too, he's the man who did the Spirit of Detroit statue right by the City County building in downtown Detroit that we occasionally decorate with jerseys when our sports teams do well. 26 feet tall. It's a very impressive structure. So besides Marshal Fredericks and the Argo Cascades, I'm going to walk you through 5 of the 20 river college unions that are in the book. Each of these river college unions gets their own chapter, and 3 pages before the first chapter, this is the page in the book, and it lists alphabetically by river each of the 20. Hopefully you can see that okay. You're not going to have to look at too many eye charts like this one. But the river that is the top alphabetically, and is also the one furthest north, is the Beta Grise River, French for the gray beast. And it's really such a mild river. I think the name is because it flows into Lake Superior, which of course can be quite challenging. So that is the river that is closest. It's way up in the Keweenaw Peninsula in Copper Country. It's the one closest to Michigan Tech University. And just to the south of there, on the outline of the UP, you have the Escanaba River by Northern Michigan University. So the Beta Grise River, Beta Grise, is one of the ones we'll talk about. And the other 4 are in the lower peninsula. And in this outline of the UP, we have 18 of the 20. So we're first going to, or among the 4 we'll look at, is in the lower right-hand corner, just downstream from the Argo Cascades at U of M. We're going to take the Huron River around Eastern Michigan University, Maggie and my alma mater. We're going to take a look at the Red Cedar River as it flows through Michigan State University. And down in the lower left-hand corner, the Macatawa, we're going to take on the north side of Hope College, right by Windmill Island, which is pretty cool. And the first one we'll look at tonight is the Rouge River as it flows around U of M Dearborn campus. Now, there were 2 different dedications I had for this book. The first is to my mom and dad, Herb and Mary Fletcher, because they were the ones that paid for most of my college Thank you. And they're the ones that first introduced me to the waters of Michigan, which in my case was Lake Michigan. Every year, our summer family vacation, we would leave our Detroit home at 3 a.m., make the 3-hour drive west across the state, and just about the time the sun came up, we would pull into Grand Haven. We stayed at the Belmar Inn. They charged us $5 a night for the whole family, and if it rained, you got your money back. Which leads me to the question, how old am I? The second dedication is to a dear friend of ours, Betty Jane Harlow, who just passed away this last December 15. Betty Jane had a canoe livery right out her backyard. She was blessed to have her home on the south bank of the Looking Glass River. And in 1970, she bought 5 canoes from her good friend, Gloria Miller, who today is a 91-year young president of Friends of the Looking Glass River, who took a 3-day canoe trip this year at age 91 down the Looking Glass, and her only bow to her age was asking help to get out of the kayak at the end of each day. So anyways, in 1970, Betty buys 5 canoes from Gloria, opens her livery. I'll just do the best I can. Over the next 45 years, she expanded her business, and she introduced me and so many other people to the beauty of the Looking Glass River. She also gave me a great tip that I use to this day. Horseflies were a problem on the Looking Glass River. She had found that Vicks Vapor Rub, horseflies hate Vicks Vapor Rub. Understandable? Yes. So you put a little Vicks Vapor Rub on your neck and arms and whatnot, and not a problem with horseflies anymore. So I thought that was pretty cool. So I always carry Vicks Vapor Rub in my dry bag. No. Question, does it work on mosquitoes too? No. What was I trying last year for mosquitoes? Catnip? Yeah, read great things about it. Yeah, mosquitoes they were laughing. Very much. Should have dropped the beat. So the first of the 5 rivers we're going to take a look at tonight is the Rouge River as it flows around the U of M Dearborn campus. We're going to start the trip on the lower Rouge, and that's going to flow, those waters will flow east, and then it merges with the main branch of the Rouge. Thank you, DJ. And it's when the main branch of the Rouge curves around the campus, that's when you get close to U of M Dearborn. The U of M Dearborn campus, 10,000 students on a 200-acre campus. 70 acres are a nature reserve along the banks of the Rouge River. Since 2008, every year their College of Business has been considered one of the top in the country by the Princeton Review. I like to stall a little bit while this picture's on the screen. With all the heat we've had this summer, the snow is kind of cooling. Now this is a picture of the Fairlane Mansion. Fairlane Mansion was built in 1915. First year the Detroit Tigers won 100 games. The bad news was the Red Sox won 101, but I digress. Built in 1915, and it was in the 1950s that the Ford Motor Company donated land adjacent to Fairlane to give to U of M so they could build the U of M Dearborn campus, which was built in 1959. Every year since 1915 till their passing in 47 and 50, this was the home of Henry and Clara Ford. One of the neat things about this is in its backyard is a dam and waterfall, and paddling up to it was one of the coolest things I've ever seen on a river, and you will see that paddler's perspective in just a few slides. So you have side by side in Dearborn, you have Fairlane, you have U of M Dearborn, and you have the Friends of the Rouge. One of the finest stewards of our waters I have met anywhere in the state of Michigan. Now most people remember that the Rouge River caught fire in 1969 and really wouldn't think about paddling it, but the Friends of the Rouge have done amazing things to educate private residents, businesses, and government, and how to, they've been able to motivate them and get them to make better decisions on how they interact with the waters of that they are nearby. These folks they organize the Rouge Rescue every year. every year since 1986. 30 years of Rouge Rescue, and there was 28 communities involved on this year's Rouge Rescue. And over the 30 years, they pulled tons of trash out of the river. They've installed native plants, and they've taken out invasive ones. You can really tell that they are having success based on the increase in population on fish and the insects, birds, and all the other wildlife. Fish as an example. It was in 2008, the Friends of the Rouge were so excited. Salmon had spawned on the river for the first time since the 60s. Well, since that time, not only salmon, but I ran into fishermen who are catching carp, catfish, smallmouth bass, largemouth bass, bluegill, northern pike, and eating the fish and living to tell the tale. Now, the restorations of our rivers is not confined to the Rouge River. Every one of the 20 rivers I write about in this book has a group that is doing wonderful work on their river's behalf. You have locally, right here on the Clinton River, Maggie and I have been giving talks at libraries around the state since 2008. I run into a lot of people who tell me about paddling the Clinton River, and they paddled it in the 60s, 70s, all the way to the early 2000s. And every story talked about all of the obstructions they had to go around and all the portaging they had to do. Well, in 2009, things changed. In 2009, Jerry Rice and his family started a canoe livery called the Clinton River Canoe and Kayak. And he and his buddy Dale Goolsby, who's here with us tonight, they have taken to the river and are out there on a regular basis with their chainsaws, with their ropes, and with their winches to clear the obstructions and to make this one of the finest rivers in the state for recreational paddling. And there's so many wonderful success stories just like that one. One thing I did jump ahead on today, I didn't tell you what gift certificates you are eligible for with the tickets you have. You could win, and with so many of you tonight, we'll probably give away at least 4 of these. I guess it'll have to be 4 because I said at least 4, I can't backtrack. In the UP, you can take a trip down either out of one livery, which is in the town of Germfask, an hour and 15 minutes past the bridge. You can either go down the Fox River, which is where Hemingway did all his fishing and camping in his youth, and then he wrote about his adventures in his book, Big Two-Hearted River. He borrowed the more romantic-sounding name of another UP river for his days in the Fox. The Fox is so fast and narrow, so narrow that at times the tag alder bushes from both shores are hitting each of your shoulders. Or you can take a trip with the same livery down the Manistique River, wide, laid-back, beginner-friendly, takes you through the heart of the Cedar National Wildlife Refuge. Or you can take a trip on the Huron River with Al Hefner's livery out of Milford, or Jerry has donated 2 gift certificates to take a trip down the Clinton River. He has 4 trips that start as far upstream as Squirrel Road in Auburn Hills at Riverside Park, and the end point as far downstream as Heritage Park in Utica. So. All right, the Rouge River trip around U of M Dearborn. We started in a small bay in Dearborn, just 3 blocks north of downtown Dearborn. You know where US 12 runs through Dearborn? There's a north-south street called Monroe Street, where Dearborn Music used to be right at the corner. I spent many hours and afternoons there. Anyways, you go 3 blocks north of US 12 on Monroe Street, and it ends at a place called Ford Field. Not the Ford Field that the underachieving Lions play at. This is a much smaller Ford Field. And so we launched at a bay. Now, there were seagulls flying above us the whole time we were putting in. Does anybody know what they call seagulls that fly over bays? They're called bagels. Now, you won't find that piece of information in any fancy ornithology book, but only right here tonight. So we launched at this bay, and as you go across the bay, you're going north about 75 feet, and you see the canoe at the top part of the screen here. There's a small channel they're going through, and they're going to encounter a body of water that is flowing from west to east, from their left to right, and that is the lower branch of the Rouge River. And we're going to take that for 45 minutes till the merger with the main branch, and that's where we'll see the dam and the waterfall at Fairlane, and then another 75 minutes downstream till we take on in the town of Melvindale. Now, I did want to show you these folks here because this group of people is greatly dedicated to not only increasing recreational opportunities on the Rouge River, but to make it a much healthier Rouge. The man second from left is Al Hefner. I know of no single person who does more to promote paddling in the state of Michigan than Al. Al comes up with all these creative programs to get people on the water who wouldn't normally, and one of them, and I love the name, is called No Child Left Inside. And it's aimed at folks who come maybe from some of the poorer neighborhoods, definitely urban areas who might not normally have the chance to get out on the water. Al's livery is on the Huron River, but after this trip on the Rouge last year, he decided to set up a livery on the Rouge where we put in at Ford Field and 3 more access points down the river, including one right across from Greenfield Village. The lady third from right, Sally Petrella, part of Friends of the Rouge, and the fellow on the far right is a UMD professor, Paul Drous. Now, since we had a university professor with us, I thought I'd ask him a question that I had given a lot of thought to recently, and that is, why do you not hear when a pterodactyl relieves itself? Well, Paul told me because the P is silent. So I thought it fascinating that a sociology professor would have that piece of information. So here we are, we've launched at Ford Field, and we're going downstream. We pass underneath this quaint pedestrian bridge. The next photo is from the bridge, and I love it because I think it really captures the joy that we had going down the Rouge River and seeing all the unexpected wildlife and paddling by the fascinating history as we went downstream. Just beyond Ford Field, there's a couple of pedestrian bridges with light rapids underneath, but nothing that would take it out of beginner-friendly status. What does take it out of beginner-friendly status is the deadwood you see along the river, and there's quite a bit of it. So because of that, you should have skills, at least be able to steer around obstructions. Sometimes it doesn't matter how good you can steer, though. There were some trees that blocked the river. What I should note that since this April 2015 expedition down the river, the city of Dearborn, along with Al Hefner's Canoe Livery and the Friends of the Rouge, are all working together to, when they hear that trees have fallen and are blocking the river, to get out there and get them out as quickly as possible, much as Jerry and Dale do with the Clinton River. So they're making it a much more paddling-friendly experience going downstream. It's a very unique mix of urban and wilderness on the Rouge. You have a lot of neighborhoods that end at the river, and then suddenly the whole environment changes, and you see wildlife in large quantities. There's a cormorant right here. We saw 12 cormorant in one tree. Maggie and I were paddling downstream, and there was a mink running along the shore for 50 feet along with our boat. We saw in large numbers beavers. We saw in large numbers blue herons and sandpipers. All of that speaks to the improved health of the river. Now, we're getting near the end of our 45 minutes on the lower branch of the Rouge, and we're going through a thick forest, as beautiful as anything you might see up north, when suddenly a body of water crosses in front of us from left to right. That was the main branch of the Rouge, and before we followed it to the right, we looked to our left, and here's what we saw. This is the backyard of Fairlane. They're going under some restoration, which still is continuing right now, and you can see the dam and the waterfall. This is only a 5-minute paddle against a very, very mild current, but just amazing. And now up on that riverbank, probably since it was built in 1915, on many nights you could see the guys who called themselves the Four Vagabonds, Henry Ford and Thomas Alva Edison, Harvey Firestone, the naturalist John Burroughs. They'd be sitting down in the chairs. Just, I can only imagine some of the conversations they had. I guess some of them were probably about the Tigers in 1915 and talking about, wouldn't it be great if our pitching was as good as our hitting? You know, things you never hear anymore. So we turn around here, and now we're going down the main branch of the Rouge River. Oh, this is the very large building. This is the powerhouse that powers the dam above the 2 stone tunnels. So right here, you see coming in from the right, that's where we paddled in from the lower branch of the Rouge, and now we're on the main branch. And the main is going to change pretty dramatically soon because the natural riverbed is going to go away, and it was replaced by a very wide, gently sloping concrete floor. The reason for this is the Rouge River floods about as often as the Clinton River floods because of all the impervious surfaces around this little river valley. Concrete does a horrible job of absorbing heavy rainfall. So when the rain hits the concrete, it goes down to this narrow little river valley, and flooding was a horrible issue, and that's what they used to replace it with, hopefully not as a long-term solution. Now, when you pass underneath the Michigan Avenue Bridge, you're 1 hour into a 2-hour trip, and just past the bridge, the main body of the river is flowing from your left to your right. And from the paddler's perspective, they look in the distance. To their left, they see Fairlane Town Center in Dearborn. And to the right, the body of water in the foreground in this picture, well, that's a little canal that will take you around Greenfield Village's Oxbow Island. And if you're in the mood to explore, it's great to take a little trip up there because this follows the original meander of the river. And we saw in large numbers, you see up on the tree there, blue herons, sandpipers, and cormorants. just absolutely beautiful in there. And then they had a lot of historical markers, such as this one, which gives you a little bit of background of the area. Fun facts: why is it called an oxbow? Because it's the shape of, what the oxen would wear, their harness. Tells you when the Potawatomi people were first found here, etc. And the initial English settlers. Very, very cool. So we come back out from our little side trip around Oxbow Island, and you can see with this concrete floor, this is just a long, long straightaway. I took this photo from underneath the Southfield Freeway Bridge, and maybe you can see in the distance, way, way out here, that's the Rotunda Drive Bridge. That's a mile away. Just past the Rotunda Drive Bridge, there's a large gray building on the right, and that houses the tamest wildlife we saw on the Rouge River. That's the Allen Park Training Facility of the Detroit Lions, where they've been rebuilding since the Eisenhower administration. I like Ike as much as the next guy, but enough is enough. So 15 minutes past Rotunda Drive, you go underneath I-94, and then 5 minutes from there you take out on the right bank, and that it's the Melvindale Community Events Center. So the trip for the book is 5 miles, it ends here, but if you wanted to take this river a little bit further, it's a pretty fascinating trip. Maggie and I did it in 2009 with the Friends of the Rouge. A half an hour from here, you're paddling right alongside, on your left, the Ford Rouge complex. And nothing quite says urban paddling like paddling by the mile-long Ford Rouge complex. Half mile wide, big turning basin. And just past that, we paddled by Fordson Island, where in 2009 there was a lot of abandoned recreational boats that were in various stages of sinking into the river with trees and bushes growing out of them. Fortson Island was created in the 20s when Henry Ford said, you know what, this thin little Rouge River from the Detroit River to my factory isn't going to cut it for the big freighters to deliver raw materials. So he cut a huge channel around the land so they'd have room for the boats, and that created Fordson Island. A lot of people moved in there in the 1920s. Last person moved out in 1989 because a local plant was sending lime dust their way, and all the homes were covered in lime, really killed the resale value. And a lot of these people just simply abandoned their boats. But since then, the boats have been taken out of the water, which I was sad to hear because it had a very Twilight Zone feel to it to paddle by them. But anyway, so that's the Rouge River by University of Michigan at Dearborn. The second river I'm going to take you down is basically on the same latitude as the Rouge at UMD, but in the southwest corner of the state. We're going to take the Macatawa flowing north around Hope College, right near the town of Holland, and their tulip gardens where Tiny Tim so lightly tiptoes. Hope College. Hope College was chartered in 1866, celebrating their 150th birthday this year. It's a liberal, private liberal arts school. A gorgeous campus in large part because of the respect and maintenance of their oldest buildings, including this one, Van Vleck Hall. This was built in 1857, 9 years before the campus was chartered, because it was the pioneer school for the first Dutch settlers who came over from Rotterdam. This was a building that really grabbed my attention, though, the Gothic Dimnet Memorial Chapel. Okay, so we're going to paddle the Macatawa River along the northern edge of Hope College. The people of the Three Fires are not these two characters, although the one on the right does build some large bonfires. The people of the Three Fires are the Native American Chippewa, Ottawa, and Potawatomi tribes. They were the original residents of the area, perhaps because they had reservations. And the people of the Three Fires named this river Macatawa, meaning Blackwater. Macatawa is a corruption of Macatawa, and it is also known as the Black River, which can be very confusing because 30 miles south of here, running from Bangor in the east to South Haven in the west, is another Black River. The Macatawa is a fairly short river. It runs for 16 miles. It begins east of Holland, and initially it flows in a northwesterly direction and then west until it empties into Lake Macatawa, which is connected by a short channel to Lake Michigan. It's a very wide, deep, laid-back river. There are large quantities of turtles. We saw a lot of carp and walleye swimming by. On this 16-mile river, we paddled a section closest to campus. It was a 3.7-mile stretch of the river that took us about an hour and 40 minutes to paddle. Halfway into that hour and 40-minute trip, we went underneath this railroad trestle, and we saw a little color in the buildings there. What we were coming up on was the eastern end of Windmill Island. The river takes you alongside the seawall there, the tall rocks, and there's a canal that cuts through the land that allows you to paddle right by Windmill Island, where the two spinning pinwheels are. And it's about a 15-minute journey through this canal with Windmill Island on the right shore where the windmill is, where the pedestrian bridge takes you over this about halfway into the 15 minutes. Pretty cool little site to be canoeing and kayaking by. If you decided this is a trip you'd like to take, I should mention a fella named Skip out of Kayak puts people in the water, and he'll also help transport if you bring your own boat. He puts people on the Macatawa, the other Black River, and the Kalamazoo River. Had some nice tulip gardens alongside us, and I thought it appropriate to ask my Dutch brother-in-law to pose in front of the windmill. It just seemed about right. So 15 minutes paddling through the canal. There is a little canoe and kayak landing at the far western end, right by the restroom, and now the main body of water comes in from the left, and you follow the flow of river to the right. Large homes across the way. This is the widest part of the Macatawa. It's 300 feet wide, but still very, very beginner-friendly. 20 minutes from the western end of Windmill Island, you see that bridge there. That's the River Avenue Bridge. You know you have the right bridge when you see the Riverwalk and the miniature windmill. Now at this point, suddenly the river will widen into Lake Macatawa. It's no longer beginner-friendly. You want to make sure your life vest is securely fastened, because on Lake Macatawa you have some very strong headwinds that come in and can make it very, very choppy ride for you. You have about 15 minutes left till they take out. On your left, you'll see an old factory, and on your right, you'll see an Upjohn plant. Now, the Upjohn plant used to manufacture Viagra, and over the years, they put a lot of product waste into the river. In the last few years, there's been reports of carp jumping quite high above the river. But it's only a problem if they've been jumping for more than 4 hours. So the third of the college river unions we're going to take you down, river college unions, is the one furthest north, the Bay de Gris River. And the Bay de Gris is, let's see if we can get this to work, a tiny little river. You'll see it better on the next slide, right in there, that flows into Bay de Gris Bay. And it is just a few minutes to the northeast of the Michigan Tech University at Houghton. Michigan Tech was founded in 1885, originally called Michigan Mining School, because before the California Gold Rush of 1849, there was the Keweenaw Peninsula Copper Rush of 1843. And there was a great need for miners in the 1880s, thus Michigan Mining School. Now, when miners first came in here, there were no roads in the Keweenaw Peninsula, 1843. So what they did is they came in through a very deep natural port right up here that eventually became known as the town of Copper Harbor. So here's a blow-up of, let's see, we've got the Bay de Gris River right here. This is Bay de Gris Bay, which is part of Lake Superior, and this entire area is part of the Bay de Gris Preserve. It's 1,800 acres of dunes and valleys and wetlands, 7,500 feet of protected beach right here along Lake Superior. So this trip starts at the public beach. It's choppy at first at times because that's the way Lake Superior can be. 15 minutes down to this channel right here where the Mendota Lighthouse sign is, and we take that to the river here, but also you can take it into Lac La Belle, French for the beautiful lake, and above Lac La Belle is Mount Bohemia. So we're going down the channel now. On the left, that is the Mendota Lighthouse. It's been decommissioned for many years, and now it's a private residence. The Army Corps of Engineers dredges through here on a regular basis. They always want to make sure it's at least 20 feet deep so that small freighters that are caught in big storms on Lake Superior have a port of refuge. It's also a port of refuge for thieving lake pirates who always need money. As an example, do you know what it costs a pirate to have their ear pierced? Buccaneer. So not too many people know that. So you're about 200 feet into the channel from Lake Superior, and you see on your right the beautiful Bay de Gris River. It's only a mile long, but its beauty far exceeds that. And it is the doorway to a number of other paddling options, inlets, channels, lakes, lagoons, all of them full of pike and perch and walleye and trout. And in the fall, they have a wonderful salmon run. We had bald eagles flying above us, and it was pretty cool. We came upon a family of sandhill cranes that were on the left shore, and the nearer we got, the friendlier they seemed to get. It's very, very cool. Now, we had wildlife of our own. We had Seiko, the kayaking dog, with us. We decided to leave the little river and go through that little strait in the distance, which would take us out into Lac La Belle. And that very large mass there, that is Mount Bohemia. It's the steepest ski run in the entire Midwest. It has the largest vertical drop, 900 feet. And not a surprise for a region that gets 250 inches of snow, they have the deepest powder of any ski run in the Midwest. Now, Seiko wasn't quite done for the day, and she was scouting out new adventures for us, and she found this beautiful little bay, great place to get out and stretch our legs, and we were surprised that a few feet in, they had a sign that gave us a little more information about the Bay de Gris Preserve. Job well done, Seiko. So now we're going to go back to that little public beach on Lake Superior we started. We're going to go north on the channel. We're going to turn right, go past the Bay de Gris River on the left, past the Mendota Lighthouse, and back out to Lake Superior. There is a livery out of Copper Harbor called the Keweenaw Adventure Club. So if you decide you'd like to rent boats and paddle this trip, I should mention that even though the trip I outlined for the book lasts barely 2 hours, you could be out there all day just paddling around the entire preserve. It's really quite beautiful. All right, on the banks of the Red Cedar is a school that's known to all. We're going to take, on the 45-mile-long Red Cedar, a 7-mile stretch that will include 3 miles right through the heart of the MSU campus. The Red Cedar is one of the longest tributaries to our longest river in the state, the 260-mile-long Grand River. Andy the canoeing dog was front and center. Andy was one of 21 paddlers who went down the Red Cedar in April of 2015. Many of us decided to pose by Sparty afterward. Sparty was dedicated in 1945, frequently defiled by Wolverine fans ever since. Sparty weighs 6,600 pounds, stands 9 feet 7 inches tall, and is the longest freestanding bronze structure in the entire world. I love this picture. I briefly considered it to use for the book cover because of the juxtaposition of the paddler and the college building. In 1855, a local made a wonderful quote, said, "The campus of the college is only a clearing in the great Michigan forest." 1855 was the year that the college that would become Michigan State University was founded as the Agricultural College of the state of Michigan. The state legislature decided to authorize the construction of a college to teach agricultural. It was the first such college in the entire country. The idea was to make scientists of farmers, the largest occupational group in Michigan in the 1850s, by teaching them proven techniques on how to get the most out of their land. The idea was they would go back to their homes, employ what they learned, their neighbors would watch and learn and employ, and their neighbors would learn and their neighbors, and all of this knowledge would radiate out or extend out, and production was improved all across Michigan. Now, this college that today is #1 in the country for graduate programs on nuclear physics stays true to the agricultural roots through the MSU Extension Services, which reach all 83 counties, where they use their resources to help maximize production throughout the state. I saw an ad in a Free Press not too long ago that said the MSU Extension Services were going to be in Southeast Michigan to help with everything from vegetable gardening to help you avoid foreclosure on your home. So we launched to the east of East Lansing, the small town of Okemos on Ferguson Road. The livery is Rivertown Adventures. Haven't had a livery servicing the Red Cedar ever that I knew of until 2014. They're right on the Grand in downtown Lansing, just north of where the Red Cedar merges into the Grand. And they also are a wonderful steward of the waters. They organize 4 river cleanups a year. They give free canoes to any MSU student who wants to come out and help, and they usually get 30 volunteers each time. This gentleman is Alan Deming. Alan is a boat builder. He is a true artist. He decided to join us this day and ride the currents in one of his cedar strip kayaks. Absolutely beautiful. His company is out of Grand Ledge called Mackinac Watercraft Company. He's also the point man for the largest canoe and kayak show in the state of Michigan, Quiet Water Symposium, first Saturday every March at the MSU Agricultural Building. I told Alan, nice to have you as part of our flotilla. I guess he thought we had a lot of people because he asked, at what point does a flotilla become an armada? Alan was a great source of information on the river, its surroundings, and also he told Maggie and I that the finest ice cream we will ever have was right on the MSU campus, MSU Dairy. He told us that on April 15. It took us till August of this year, and we could not disagree. I was a little surprised, though, that Maggie ordered Buckeye Blitz. But it did have the word Blitz in it, so she kind of saved herself. But they were very cool. Now, when we launched on this trip in April 15, the river was in what they would consider normal summertime conditions. We launched as 2 feet wide, 60 feet deep. Now, here's a great example of how heavy rains can change the flow of a river. Meg? Oh, my God. That's insane. 2 feet deep, 60 feet wide. And that is why Maggie comes with me. Besides a minor comedic relief. When we took this trip in April of last year, it took us 3 hours and 20 minutes to paddle the 7 miles. 3 hours, 20 minutes. In May of 2010, we paddled the day after a 3-inch rainfall, which really elevated the river. We launched 3.5 miles further upstream, so 10.5, instead of a 7-mile trip, it was a 10.5-mile trip. We ended at Aurelius Road, past the campus. It took us 3 hours and 15 minutes to do the 10.5 miles versus 3 hours, 20 minutes to do the 7 miles last year. That river was flying, and the rapids at the MSU administration building were borderline treacherous, and you'll see those rapids in a few slides. Now, besides the MSU wildlife, we did see quite a bit of wildlife on the Red Cedar. We saw ducks and deer and turtles in large numbers. There was a nesting goose who was trying her best to avoid eye contact. A fisherman setting up for the day said he had caught 5 pike on the river the day before. And the birds singing created a symphonic wall of sound. It was absolutely gorgeous. And through this wildlife, Andy, the canoeing dog, kept her cool. Groucho Marx would have loved Andy. Groucho said the only thing he liked better than kicking back with a good book was dogs. The way Groucho put it was, outside of a dog, a book is man's best friend. Inside of a dog, it's too dark to read. So that was Groucho Marx. 90 minutes into the trip, we're going underneath the Hagedorn Road Bridge. We now will be alongside Michigan State property for the next hour and a half. And it was gorgeous April weather. We saw a lot of students in hammocks dotting the shoreline. We are now halfway into the trip when we see the rock on the right or the north shore. The rock was a gift from the class of 1873 to the university. Giving rocks as gifts didn't take off immediately. It took 102 years before the pet rock craze took off. The rock not only is a halfway point in this trip, but it also is serving as a starting point for what appears is going to be an annual canoe and kayak race. It's called the Sea to Sea 160, Campus to Coast 160-mile race. It starts at the rock, and you paddle the last 8 miles of the Red Cedar into the Grand River in downtown Lansing, and then take the last 152 miles of the Grand into Lake Michigan at Grand Haven. This year it was raced on April 22. Took 25 and a half hours for the winning boat. If you think about the famous Osabo race from Grayling to Oscoda, that's a 130-miler, and that's very impressive, but now we're kicking it up to 160. The rock is just before you go into the Farm Lane Road Bridge, and 8 minutes past the rock, you are at the very beginning of the Msu Rapids. So this is right by the administration building. This is a blast to paddle, but not for beginners. Beginners should probably portage on the left shore where the concrete steps are, or right across the river. There's a nice little dirt to take out. Very, very fun to run these, depending on the time of year. And how high or low the water is. The rapids run for probably about 150 feet. And then there's a great put-in point about 200 feet downstream where you can go in the water. Alan wisely took his beautiful wooden boat out of the water. You don't run a wooden boat like this through these rocks. Although it looks fairly deep, it is not at all. Now, that's the very start of the rapids. This was, we had come up with the word scooching the rapids, where you get stuck on the rocks and you're kind of scooching the boat ahead. In May of 2010, there was no scooching required. This drop right here was so much higher that I was basically in the back boat where my buddy is in blue on the left. There were 2 canoes 50 feet in front of me. When they first hit the rapids, they completely disappeared from my sight. So that's how high the rapids are, how deep they can get. And just about that time, I noticed that all the students on shore had raised their phones at me to photograph my demise. Mothers were shielding their babies' eyes. I took this all as a very bad sign. But nobody tipped in either 2010 in the high water or the low water last year, but again, fun to run, but not for beginners. They should definitely portage. Now, once you get to the end of the rapids, in about 7-8 minutes, you'll see Spartan Stadium on your left. Andy is a lifelong fan and decided to photobomb when I took the photo. What she was pretending to look at was across the river, the Beale Botanical Gardens, the oldest continuously operated university botanical gardens in the country. Also 1873, just like the year the rock was donated. And just a few seconds downstream from the stadium, this is the canoer and kayaker's perspective of Sparty, back beyond the trees there. And because it was April in East Lansing, there were graduates across the way. It occurred to me, if I asked them if they were searching for Mrs. Robinson, they would have no idea what I was talking about. 15 minutes past Sparty, you have reached the edge of MSU property, and you have another 30 minutes from there, or 45 minutes from the end of Sparty, till the takeout at a park called Ralph Kriegel Park at Aurelius Road. Kruger Landing, named after the great paddler Verlin Kruger. Very, very laid back. You're beyond all the buildings, nice and quiet. This is the Kalamazoo Road Bridge we're going under. If you're on the bridge, 3/4 of a mile to your left is Breslin Center. A little basketball played there. And a 1/4 mile to the right is Dagwood's Bar, founded in 1947, still waiting for their first remodeling. God bless them. It's an old classic watering hole. The staff at Dagwood's wears t-shirts that quote W.C. Fields, says, "I don't drink anymore. On the other hand, I don't drink any less either." Yeah, it's an old joke. But anyways, so about 20 minutes past here, there's a beautiful creek 5 minutes from the end that comes in from the left. And I have been told that when the foliage is not out, very early or late in the season, there's some fantastic eagle's nest to see up there. And then 5 minutes past there, we're at the takeout. You can see Alan's beautiful cedar strip kayak survived it nicely. So one final River College Union I want to take you by. It's another green and white school, but this one a little bit to the southeast. And downstream from the Argo Cascades, we are going to take the Huron River as it flows to the north and the east of what's right in here, the Eastern Michigan University campus. Now, this was the shortest trip we did for the book. It was only 2 miles long, 45 minutes, and the reason it was so short is because it is bracketed on the north by a dam right here, the Peninsula Paper Company Dam, and bracketed down here by I-94 and Ford Lake. You could have paddled into Ford Lake, but our group of paddlers likes to have a current at our back, so we're not really lake folks. Now, EMU was founded in 1849 as a Michigan State Normal School. I always get a kick out of the fact that Eastern Michigan was called Michigan State over 100 years before Michigan State was called Michigan State. Michigan State was Michigan Agricultural College, I think, till the late 50s, something like that. Anyways, Michigan State Normal School, because they were a school that trained teachers. They were the first such school outside of the original 13 colonies. And today at Eastern, they graduate more teachers than any other school in the nation. And for 13 years running, they have been listed as one of the best in the Midwest by the Princeton Review. The campus is a beautiful meld of historic and modern. One of the historic buildings is this one, Starkweather Hall, 1897. And then one of the newer ones, the Student Union, 2006, right next to 10-acre University Park. Now, although not technically on the campus, the Ypsilanti Water Tower has always been very closely associated with the Eastern Michigan student body. Giggity, giggity. 147 feet tall. It was built 40 years after the college was founded, so it was built in 1889. It was one of the major sources of water for the town back then. It's on the National Register of Historic Places. So now the river itself. From the river, we're on the north side of the Huron River. We're right near the intersection of Huron River Drive and LaForge Roads. You can see some of the dormitories at Eastern to the south. We're going to launch at the dam here. And the river, it's very, very shallow. It never got deeper than 2 feet, 6 inches, 2 feet deep, about 80 feet wide. And the Huron River is considered the cleanest of all the urban rivers in the state of Michigan, due in large part to the efforts of the Huron River Watershed Council. They have done a wonderful job in teaching and doing what they preach and getting out and doing cleanups on the river. Just fantastic work ever since their founding in 1965. They are a blessing to everybody who loves Michigan. Had some nice wildlife. We had hawks flying above. We had deer running through the dirt beaches. Had a lot of blue heron sightings. We saw kingfishers. We had ducks swimming with the boats. Now you go past the 4th Street Bridge, some really nice rapids, and about 20 minutes into the trip or so, we come up to Cross Street. the concrete street above, and right beneath Cross Street is the beautiful three-legged wooded tridge. Now the tridge connects Frog Island to the far left, which is the northeast. To the right, it connects to Riverside Park. I have a couple pictures of that. And then the sunlit part of it goes straight east, right alongside Cross Street, and that takes you into Ypsilanti's historic Depot Town. And on the eastern end of Depot Town is a Sidetrack Bar. Eastern Michigan founded in 1849. Sidetrack Bar opened 1850. Not a coincidence. Going to the Sidetrack for a burger and a beer is a long-standing Eastern Michigan tradition. And it gets rave reviews all across the country. GQ magazine said the Sidetrack burger is one of the 20 burgers you must eat before you die. Oprah has a Sidetrack burger on her best of the best list. The Sidetrack Bar was open 60 years after Benjamin Franklin passed, and they honor him by posting one of his quotes on their awning: "Beer is the proof that God loves us and wants us to be happy." I think your kite gets hit by lightning a few times and you reevaluate what's really important in your life. So that's where I think he was coming from. Okay, so here's a view of the Tridge from Cross Street, and in the distance you see the pavilion at Riverside Park. Not only is that the halfway point on the short 2-mile trip, that's the exact 2/3 mark of the 129-mile-long Huron River. So it's 86 miles downstream from its headwaters in northwest Pontiac and 43 miles upstream from where the river flows through Rockwood on into Lake Erie. Another view of the pavilion and from the water. Now just past the pavilion, there was a little dirt takeout. And the reason I mention this is, this was the 20th and final river we paddled for the book. And Maggie said we should make it the last one, and we should also take the trip on August 1st. And the reason we did that, and the reason it's such a good idea, is on 8/1/81, Maggie and I were married at this park, Riverside Park. So this was our 34th anniversary when we took the trip downstream. We were married on the same day as Chuck and Di. And although they had more media coverage, our marriage lasted much, much longer. And that's a good trade. That's a trade like Michigan trading Toledo to Ohio for the Upper Peninsula. Or for baseball fans, that's like the Tigers trading Steve, not even Don, Demeter, to the Cleveland Indians for Norm Cash in 1960. So that's a good trade. This is a picture from our 5-year anniversary at the park with the Huron River flowing in the background. So we're back out on the water. We're still alongside Riverside Park, and we're approaching Michigan Avenue Bridge, US 12. There's some fantastic rapids that develop about 200 yards upstream, and they'll take you all the way beneath the bridge. Very, very fun. But the sad part is once you hit the bridge, you have less than 20 minutes left in the trip, and this was such a laid-back, beautiful journey. We loved it. When you go underneath this bridge, you only have 5 minutes left to go. That's the pedestrian bridge at Waterworks Park, and we took out on the left shore at Spring Street. So, but a really, really fun trip. So many great trips on the Huron. One of my favorite, especially with the fall colors coming up and cider mills opening up, is to launch in Dexter at Hudson Mills Metro Park. And in about an hour and 15 minutes, you go right past the Dexter cider mill, which opened, or it's already opened. We stop there and get donuts and cider, and 20 minutes further downstream, there's a great metro park, Dexter Huron Metro Park. Great place to eat the donuts and just have a picnic. And then you have about another 1 hour to the takeout just before the Delhi Rapids on the west end of Ann Arbor. This was the back page for the book. I had taken my dad's fraternity paddle from his days at Wayne State, 1950, and took a river paddle from old wooden river paddle from the same era. It just seemed like the ideal way to end a book entitled Canoeing and Kayaking College Campuses in Michigan. There's one last college story I think you might get a kick out of. In 1960, Eastern Michigan students craving for pizza opened up the eyes of two brothers on an opportunity to make a little money. There was a pizzeria operating on Cross Street called Dominic's, and the two brothers offered to buy it out, James and Tom Monahan. They bought the pizzeria, and about a year later, James was ready to try something else. So Thomas traded his Volkswagen Beetle to James for James' half of the business. Now Tom Monahan is the sole owner in 1961. He changed the name from Dominic's to Domino's Pizza, and he embarks on an expansion of the stores. Up to 1983, when the 1,000th store opens up, and late that same year, he takes some of his profits made selling pizza over the years and buys the Detroit Tigers just in time for their 1984 World Series championship. All because Eastern Michigan students had a craving for pizza. So pizza's so good in so many ways. This is the final slide we have in the presentation. It has our website on here, and Maggie and I both have business cards that we're happy to pass out should you be interested. It has not only our website address on there, but it has my email address. And I probably get 2-3 emails a week from people who they're looking for a river in a certain part of the state, or I'm taking a group of people camping, I'm looking for a river with a lot of campgrounds, I'm going up to the UP, I've never been, whatever your question is. And you can also contact us through the website should you not take a business card, but canoeingmichiganrivers.com. Included in our website, Maggie and I have identified 72 rivers in the state of Michigan that are serviced by a canoe and kayak livery, like Clinton River Canoes and Kayaks. And so we list them alphabetically, first Upper Peninsula and then Lower Peninsula. And beneath each river, we have a complete listing, or as complete as we've come up with, of all of the liveries that service those various rivers, and then links to all of their websites. We have links to 45 environmental groups across the state where you can click on their link and find out when they have their river cleanups, or find out when they have their social paddles. There is a group out of the Lansing area called Grand River Environmental Action Team. They do 4 social paddling outings a year, and you come with them, you don't even need to bring a boat. They'll give you a boat, they'll give you it for free, and you're paddling different rivers. They do the Grand, they've done the Huron, they do the Kalamazoo, they've done the Raisin. Check their schedule and just decide to show up with some folks who love the river and who share their knowledge of the river with you when they're going downstream. And they always have one person stay in the back as a safety so nobody gets left behind. There's a lot of great stuff going on around the state like that, and we have much of that information on our website. I also have descriptions on all my books. All the books are up here for sale if anybody's interested. Everything in the back wall is free. And because we're like a traveling road show, we were just at the Dexter Library last night, and we always put up brochures from canoe and kayak liveries. Those liveries appreciate what we do, and they give us the gift certificates that we in turn give out to you folks. Well, thank you so much for coming tonight. Thanks for laughing at the bad jokes. I appreciate that. So.